welcome the citizens of Colleton County to this virtual forum. We want to make sure Colleton citizens can see the Democratic and Republican candidates for sheriff for the June 9th primary. I want to remind everybody that voting has already started Monday through Friday from 8 till 5, and you can do that at the registrar's office. With all the restrictions in place for COVID-19, a public forum or debate was not possible. Therefore, the Republican and Democratic parties and the NAACP have coordinated efforts to present this candidates forum for the citizens of Colleton County. This forum is taking place in the gallery of the Colleton County Civic Center. The two political parties and the NAACP appreciate the use of the facility and the venue. We extend our appreciation to the Colleton County Administrator Kevin Griffin and Matt Mardell, the Technology Department of the county as well, and PRTC for their support in this endeavor. Now we're going to start part one, and that's going to include our Democratic candidates. The forum will have 3 of the 4 Democratic candidates, and unfortunately Pinky Regalado was unable to participate. Once again, we'll have 3 of the 4 Democratic candidates, and we'll have 5 Republican candidates. The 4 Democratic candidates are first, once in part one of this forum, once it's complete, the Democratic candidates will leave, and then there will be a transition so that the Republican candidates can come into the gallery and begin part 2 of the forum. This is the format that we will follow for part 1 of the forum with the 3 Democratic candidates. We'll have Alicia Bodison, that will be candidate number 1, Arthur Jordan, candidate number 2, and Harold Larry, candidate number 3. Once again, Pinky Regalado will not be able to participate. The 3 candidates will be seated in the tables in alphabetical order. The candidates are named and numbered alphabetically, 1, 2, and 3. Throughout the forum, candidates will refrain from personal attacks on another candidate. A timekeeper is going to be seated in front of the candidates, off camera. The timekeeper will raise a yellow card to signify 1 minute expired and a red card to signify the expiration of 2 minutes. The candidates will remain seated to introduce themselves and respond to questions. Each candidate will be given 1 minute for a personal introduction and to share what he or she hopes to accomplish in operating and or improving the Sheriff's Department. Following the introductions, 2 questions that were given to the candidates in advance of the forum will be given to each of the candidates. Each question will be posed in a round-robin fashion. That means candidates 1 and then 2 and 3 will be answering the first question in that order. Then candidates 2, 3, and 1 will answer the second question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Following these 2 questions, I will then present questions 3 and 4. Now these questions, which the candidates have not seen in advance, 3 and 4. For question 3, candidates 3, 1, and 2 will answer in that order. For questions 4, candidates 1, 2, and 3 will answer in that order. After all 4 questions have been completed, each candidate will have 1 minute for a conclusion that should include 3 primary goals that the candidate would like to pursue as an elected sheriff. The candidates will conclude in the same order as with the introductions. That's candidates 1, 2, and 3. At that point, the Democratic candidates will vacate the room and allow the transition to the Republican candidates. Does anyone have any questions? Everybody good with that? All right, well, let's start. Part 1 for the Democrats, once again, running for the sheriff of Colleton County. All right, what we'd like to do first is let the actual candidates introduce themselves and share what he or she hopes to accomplish in operating and or improving the Sheriff's Department. And once again, we'll begin with candidate number 1, which is Alicia Bodison. Ms. Bodison, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Alicia Bodison, and I am one of the Democratic candidates here for Sheriff in Colleton County. I'm a native of Colleton County. I've been born, raised, went to high school here. I'm a Walterboro High School graduate, class of 1986. My accomplishments, I have a bachelor's degree in business management as well as a master's degree in business and organizational security management from Webster University. I attend church here all my life, and I've been in law enforcement about 26 and a half years. I started my career here in Colleton County at the Sheriff's Office From there, I moved on to Trident Technical College, where I am now. I'm a supervisor in public safety, as well as short time with the South Carolina Department of Probation and Parole here in Colleton County. I love what I do. I have a passion for helping people, and one of my goals here in Colleton County is to bring back bridging the gap between the community and law enforcement. We want our community members and our community leaders to feel safe here in Colleton County.
Thank you once again, Ms. Bodison. That's Alicia Bodison, and she is the first Democrat running for the sheriff of Colleton County. Up next is candidate number 2, Arthur Jordan. You have the floor, Mr. Jordan.
Yes, I am Arthur Jordan. I'm a lifelong resident of Colleton County. I'm a military veteran. I'm also retired law enforcement with the South Carolina Department of Correction, retired as a warden. Also retired from the Charleston County Sheriff's Office as a special judicial sheriff working the courts. I'm married with 3 children, dedicated to the service of this country and this state. Meanwhile, my primary goal and objectives is to, as sheriff, is to bridge the gap with the community and the sheriff's department. Transparency being number 1, to communicate with the community, get the trust of the community so that the community can inform us of what's going on in the community to help us combat some of the crimes that are in this community, such as gang relation, drugs. These are some of the things that I want to cure in my county. I have children, I have family just like you, and I want to make a difference. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem or the excuse.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Once again, candidate number 2, the Democratic candidate for sheriff for Colleton County. And our third candidate, Mr. Harold Lowry. Mr. Lowry, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much. First off, thank you for being in attendance today. Certainly appreciate this opportunity. I'm Harold Ray Lowry. First I'm a Christian, a husband, and a father. I was born in the old hospital across from Bulldog Stadium on North Lemon Street, delivered into the world by Dr. Joseph Flowers. I have attended, this is my alma mater, one of my alma maters, Hampton Street, also Black Street, Colleton Middle School, and I'm also a 1986 graduate of Walterboro High School. Ms. Bodison. But nevertheless, from there I joined the Army, where I served as a paratrooper in 18th Airborne Corps, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I'm married for 30 years to my lovely bride, Angela May Lowry, the wife of my children. 3 of my children, all educated here in the public schools in Colleton County. Proud to say that they all have a 4-year college degree, so you get what you want when you come to our schools in Colleton County. Praise the Lord for that. My goal is to earn the trust back in the community.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Lowry, and let's get question number 1 underway. And this once again going to be started with candidate number 1, which will be Alicia Bodison. Ms. Bodison, school-based resource officers impact the lives and safety of children, teens, and educators. Please provide some specifics on how you would assign SROs at the different levels, as well as the experience and traits the officers should have for each level, considering the difference in elementary versus high school students. Ms. Bodison.
Okay, well, I was a school resource officer here in Colleton County for about 14 years. I supervised the unit. One of the biggest things that I feel the officer should want to be a school resource officer. School resource officers are empathetic and they care about people. They care about the students. These are the people that they see, these young people see on a daily basis. They want someone that they can trust and feel comfortable about talking with different issues, as well as the staff and at these schools. I've dealt with a lot of issues with staff away from campus, as well as problems they were having at home. So school resource officers should be, 1, transparent, and they should be caring and loving people. They shouldn't be placed in a unit just because they're punished for doing something somewhere else, or just anyone. I mean, they should be carefully selected, and they should also be able to go out in the communities and do different activities with our young people as well as the parents.
All right, once again, thank you, Ms. Bodison. Up next is our I'm sorry, still another one? Okay, go ahead, you still got some time.
Okay. Also, The school resource officers should be doing a lot of training throughout the school year as well as during the summers when they're out of school, because that training is gonna help them throughout that school year. So it's very important that these officers are placed in these schools and they are ready and prepared for what's coming about. Because there are so many issues within the schools, and there are so many issues that our children are dealing with at home and they bring to school. So they need someone that they can trust within the system.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bodison. Once again, that's candidate number one, Ms. Alicia Bodison. Up next is going to be our next Democratic candidate for the Sheriff of Colleton County, Mr. Arthur Jordan. Now, Mr. Jordan, would you like me to repeat the question? It's the same question.
No, sir, I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan.
When placing a school resource officer, first thing I want to look at is a seasoned officer with at least 3 years or more experience on the force. I will also look at their education, because we want to make sure that we have an officer there that can teach and train as well, because that's going to be part of their job, teaching and training the children about various things and objects. I want one that's approachable and is good with children. Everybody's not good with children. We want more children that are good with children. And I want to also look at the officer's history in the community to make sure that he's good in the community, that he gets along with people in the community, and that the community trusts them. Along with the 2 weeks training that the SROs get, I will also entertain some other training such as diversity and bias training, particularly for the high schools, and educate them on LBG, because their kids are getting older and we're having a transition in our community, and they have to be able to deal with that as well. And also making sure that they understand when you're dealing with the kids, that we want to not try to use any use of force, but try to disable the situation through counseling and training. As far as the high school, I would train all of my SROs on the same level so that the elementary school can meet the needs of the high school and vice versa, just in case we have to interchange these officers. And also put in place adopt a school where other officers can deal with not only just the elementary, but the daycares and the primary, because they start at a young age. Kids are very smart and intelligent, so we don't want to wait till they get to elementary and high school. We want them to be introduced to law enforcement at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. And once again, up next, our third Democrat running for sheriff, Democratic candidate once again running for the Sheriff of Colleton County, is Mr. Harold Lowry. Mr. Lowry, it's going to be the same question, but I can repeat it if you'd like. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, sir, I think I'm fine.
Thank you.
I also was a school resource officer with the Colleton County Sheriff's Office for the last 3 years of my tenure there. That's how I got offered a position, I guess you could say, by the school district at that time where I'm currently at. The resource officers, like Mr. Jordan said, certainly they need to be able to fit the bill at whatever school they're at. That may be elementary, middle, or high. One of the first things I said, the first thing I did say I would do as the sheriff if I was elected was to make sure the elementary schools had a resource officer, because many citizens didn't realize up until several months ago they did not, until the federal government allocated money to the states and actually authorized Colleton County for new resource officers for our elementary schools. We thank Governor McMaster for that, and certainly the federal government. The qualities that a resource officer should have is certainly they should be caring and compassionate. Certainly they should be an officer that likes being around young people, that enjoys being around young people. And they need to be someone who certainly has the desire to help young people succeed. That's what I did when I was there. It seemed to work for me. As far as the rest of it goes, the training is the same. Mr. Jordan, he hit on diversity and different types of training. The school resource officer can do much more in the school than what the sheriff's office actually has them doing right now, if you want to be honest about it. So many times what we see now is a reactive instead of proactive approach by our resource officers. They wait until something to happen in the school and then they go react. You need to be in those classrooms and in those hallways with those kids. If you're around those kids all the time, you get to know them. You learn the things they do. make it successful.
All right, once again, thank you, Mr. Lowry. Now, once again, it's a reminder that our next question is gonna be done in, like we said earlier, in the round robin fashion. So the very first question will go to candidate number 2, Mr. Arthur Jordan. And here's the question. Gangs, drug-related activities, shootings, etc., continue to cause the citizens of Colleton County concern. Explain the policies and efforts that can be or need to be implemented to curtail these activities. Once again, going to our candidate number 2, Mr. Arthur Jordan. Mr. Jordan.
Well, first, as elected sheriff, I was going and form a gang drug task force specifically designed to go out in the community to rid us of that disease. Also, you know, being a sheriff, the sheriff needs help, the department needs help. We need help from the community. We can't do it alone. So one of my other primary goals is to get in the community and regain the trust of the community, to let them know that we're there for them so that they can trust us enough to give us these information to help us rid this community of this gang and drug relation. I would also, if feasible, try to get together a community activist team together so that we can coordinate with the sheriff's office to get the information out to the sheriff's office to better serve the community, because we don't know it all. But the community sure does. We have to trust them, and we have to gain their trust so that they can give us the information to do our job as far as the gang task force goes. I'm not sure what the department has in place right now. They may have something in place, so I will go in and review their policies, review what they have in place, and what we'll enhance what we got, and what's not working, we'll take it away, and we'll put something that works. But we have to get people that we can trust, we have to get foots on the ground. I will also make sure that officers are prevalent in the community in these areas that are affected by that, so that they can be seen. And you know, officers' presence in our training is one of the most important things. If the officers not present, then activities are going to occur. So we want to make sure that officers are out in the community, face being shown, foot on the ground, 24/7, communicating with the community, and bringing that information back so that the gang and drug force team can do their jobs.
All right, once again, thank you, Mr. Jordan. Our next candidate up for the question is Mr. Harold Lowry. Now, Mr. Lowry, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, sir, I think I'm fine, thank you. In one of my statements I've already made on my page and over the internet is the fact that one of the things that needs to be done immediately is to reinstate the narcotics, warrants, and gang unit. A lot of citizens do not realize that under the tenure of the last administration, those units have been disbanded. All of those units have fit into the sheriff's office budget in the past. So certainly, it's not an issue of the budget. It's an issue of getting it done and reinstating those units. The fact of the matter is, drugs will always be around. As long as the world turns, there will be a percentage of the population with an appetite for illegal drugs. So a narcotics warrant is always needed at your sheriff's office. The only thing that will change there is the way they are dealt with and apprehended, and through the evolution of drugs will change, and those habits of people will change. But as far as going to the gang, like I said, narcotics, warrants, and gang. If you don't have boots on the ground, like Mr. Jordan said, if you don't have boots on the ground out there in these troubled areas, then criminals have that freedom to roam. If you don't have a warrants unit, then they know that folks aren't out actively seeking them, and they're going to continue their criminal activity. But certainly if you know that somebody is out actively seeking you and being proactive, then certainly you are going to take note of that as a criminal.
Thank you, Mr. Lowry. And next, once again, it's our Miss Alicia Bodison. It's going to be the same question, Miss Bodison, and would you like me to repeat the question?
No, sir. As Mr. Lowry and Mr. Jordan said, A gang unit and a narcotics unit is necessary. Every department should have one. I believe in community-oriented policing. A community-oriented policing team is the team that goes out into these communities. They work one-on-one with the citizens in the community, and these are the people that they see on a daily basis. So when someone in the community has a problem, they have a familiar face at the sheriff's office that they can reach out to. Those community-oriented police officers would work one-on-one with the gang and the drug task force. So it would be a collaborative effort in the sheriff's office amongst these programs. They would all work together, and they would also help educate the community on what they should and shouldn't be doing. The Citizens Academy, I talked a lot about implementing a Citizens Academy board because the citizens of Colleton County need to be educated on what they can and cannot do lawfully. People have a right to protect themselves, to protect their property, and they also have a right to protect their neighbors. Look around, report things that's going on within your community. So within a community-oriented policing program, they have that one officer or those two officers that's coming out every day that they see. And they're gonna go to that officer. And that officer reports back to the sheriff's office and works with the necessary units to combat the problem.
Once again, thank you, Ms. Bodison, Alicia Bodison. Now, our next question is gonna start with, once again, candidate number 3, which is Harold Lowry. Mr. Lowry, unfortunately, South Carolina has received national recognition for a high incidence of violence against women. What is the role of the Sheriff's Department and law enforcement in creating safe communities for women and girls? Mr. Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Criminal domestic violence certainly is a huge problem within our county and within the state of South Carolina. And certainly it's been that way for years. What needs to happen and what is the key here is education. Okay, education is the key to solving these concerns and these problems. Without being educated, the people, the victims of these crimes, they don't know what's possible for them to do, or where they should go, or where they should seek help. But certainly the sheriff's office needs to be a guiding light in that situation. And we need to have victims advocates who advocate for these people, more than just one. Okay, we need more than just one victims advocate at the sheriff's office, because certainly there's more case work than that one can handle. But there are concerns with that, and certainly it will continue to be a problem until we change a culture. We have an entire culture to change, and it starts within our schools with our young people and educating them, so as the generations come forward, they understand that there are things that they shouldn't do. And one of them is hit on women, or vice versa, for a woman to hit on a man. I've been to both cases. I know Ms. Boston probably has too, Mr. Jordan has too. The shoe goes on both feet, actually. Of course, you hear about women more, certainly, being the victims, but certainly through education, that problem can be resolved.
Thank you, Mr. Lowry. Up next is our candidate for sheriff under the Democratic Party is Alicia Bodison for this question. Once again, Ms. Bodison, it will be the exact same question, or would you like me to repeat it?
No, sir. As Mr. Lowry said, our victims advocates are here to support our victims. Victims of domestic violence exist. A lot of people take a side eye to it. They don't like to acknowledge the fact that it happens, but it happens. And these people, both men and women, need to know that they have a right to be safe, and they have other resources that they can utilize. Victims advocates are educated. They go through different programs as far as training. They are affiliated with other organizations within the community as well as the whole state. So there are resources out there, and the community needs to be educated on those resources, that they are available. We've had crime victims where the victims advocate had to utilize funeral services as far as utilizing the victims advocate services to help funeralize victims. So there are funds out there available for victims, and there are a lot of different resources. And like I said, the community needs to be educated on that. And if they know that those resources are in existence, they can utilize them and help them. And our victims advocates can't do it alone. It takes everyone to help combat that problem.
Thank you, Ms. Bodison. Up next, our next candidate, same question, is going to be Mr. Arthur Jordan. Mr. Jordan, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, sir, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My first response to that would be, from the sheriff's office, is to apprehend the assailants that are doing the assault on these women. Also, to be tougher on the penalties, to be consistent in convicting these individuals instead of placing them back out on the streets. Trying to get no bond for them so that the victim can feel safe. As Mr. Crosby and Mr. Bodison says, educating the community of what we can and cannot do for them. But first we have to get the community to trust us. A lot of times they all say, well, you're gonna lock them up and you're gonna let them go and you're not gonna think nothing else of it because you got so many cases, this, that, and the other. I'm on the back burner. Well, we have to show them that we wanna put them first when it comes to violence. If we don't, then, like Ms. Bodison says, they may end up in a coffin. We don't want to wait till that time. We want to do this from Jump Street. We want to make sure that these individuals that are committing these crimes are held accountable to the highest. And we have to make sure that when we convict them, that the officers have the who, what, where, why, and when, that they don't get off on technicalities. We have to ensure that the victims, that they're safe, so when they go to court, that they can testify that this happened and not say, well, I don't want to testify or be afraid. Put programs in the community to teach them. Have a victims assault self-defense team, teach them to defend themselves. There's a lot of avenues and programs that we have for victims, and we just need to utilize them. And we can do that as long as we have good communication with the businesses and the community, because we have people out in the communities that have experience. We have a lot of retired personnel. We have businesses that wants to help, but they're not going to invest in someone or a department that they don't trust. That's going to utilize their funds and their time wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Our next question is going to start with candidate, once again, Ms. Alicia Bodison. Ms. Bodison, what knowledge or experience do you have in managing a complex budget with multiple funding streams? What would you do to ensure that the department will be a good manager of its resources? Would be once again, a good manager of its resources?
Okay, well, as far as a budget itself, I have not managed an individual budget. I've taken courses and I've completed those courses, and they have taught us how to manage a budget. We've actually had to create budgets. We've had to go through everything and nitpick everything bit by bit. So within my education, I have been getting the experience that I need as far as a budget. My leadership roles, I have worked as a lieutenant at the sheriff's office. I have supervised many officers as far as school resource officers and road patrol officers. So I have the experience and I have the knowledge, and I'm ready and willing to do whatever it takes to be the sheriff of Colleton County, the best sheriff possible. So yes, I do have some experience, but I think I am ready for that position. I know I am.
Thank you, Ms. Bodison. Up next, same question once again. It's going to go to Mr. Candidate, Mr. Arthur Jordan. Would you like me to repeat the question, Mr. Jordan?
No, sir, thank you. I have not directly managed budgets, but I have overseen budget, approved budget. One thing about a budget, you have to make sure that it's in line with your mission statement, and make sure that it is spent wisely with your mission statement, and that it is utilized, and that the resource is being used to its fullest and not being misused and abused. I have approved budget. I've sat on budget board. I worked at the South Carolina Department of Corrections for 27 years as a warden, administrator, supervisor, manager, and so you're talking about $250,000 budget for institutions. So we had to make sure that inmates are clothed, inmates are fed, officers are uniformed, staff are trained. There's a lot goes into a budget. But when you're dealing with a budget, you need to make sure what you got, what you're dealing with. Now, I know that we can all, what I don't know, I will ensure that I have people in place that does. Sheriff does not know it all. We're not all mathematicians, we're not all budgetary, we're not all this, but as an administrator and a leader, I can determine what's good for the department by choosing and putting people in place to help me. For one that says that it does not need help, no sheriff can run a sheriff department by themselves or serve a community by themselves. We need one another and each other. We need good communication with the citizen. We need our staff to be accountable. We need transparency. And I'm sure that whatever budget that is given to me from this county, I'm pretty sure that there's already a platform for how to use it, and I will make sure that I follow that platform and make sure that the money is spent wisely and go where it's supposed to go, and not for anything personal or personal use, or just because I want it, because I'm sure, because I want to make a name for myself. I want to make sure that the people are going to benefit from it, the county's going to benefit from it, the officers going to benefit from it, everyone benefits from it, everyone knows where every penny, where every dollar goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. And finally, on this question, we've got Mr. Harold Lowry. Candidate Lowry, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, sir, I'm fine, Mr. Crosby, thank you. One of my statements I've already put out is the first thing I would do is your sheriff would have SLED come in and conduct a thorough audit of the sheriff's office budget to include finances, weapons, etc., down to evidence. All of that needs to be audited and taken care of immediately, because certainly as your sheriff I would need to know where I was at to know where I was going. Now, about a budget. No, I haven't had the experience of operating a several $million budget. I don't think many citizens in Colleton County can say they have. But nevertheless, I am a college graduate from the University of South Carolina with a bachelor's in criminal justice and psychology and 2 associates of science in education. And I can add and subtract and multiply and divide. And certainly I can tell you where priority needs to be. All right, because right now, for instance, there are positions at the sheriff's office that were created under the last tenure of the administration that are not pertinent to the primary mission of the office of sheriff. If I'm elected your sheriff, then certainly we will trim the fat, because there is fat to be trimmed. And certainly if you look around and you see these vehicles that some of these folks are driving in, I'll settle for a Crown Victoria, because certainly it would fit much more nicely into the budget than some of these vehicles I see. Certainly we have the money in the budget, it just needs to be spent more wisely.
Thank you, Mr. Lowry. Once again, Harold Lowry. And it's time now for the conclusion of our part 1, which is the, once again, it's part of our virtual forum for Democratic and Republican candidates for sheriff, and we've been talking so far with the Democratic candidates. Now it's time for us to give each candidate 1 minute to conclude giving 3 primary goals as a sheriff. Once again, 1 minute and 3 primary goals as a sheriff. And we'll start once again with Ms. Alicia Bodison. Ms. Bodison.
Okay, my first primary goal will be the implementation of an internal affairs division. This is a division that investigates corruption within the department. This is a division that we do not currently have at the sheriff's office. Every agency of this size should have an internal affairs division. My second goal would be to implement a citizens academy. This academy would educate our citizens here in Colleton County on the laws, what they can and cannot do legally and lawfully. And as I said earlier, every citizen has a right to protect themselves and to protect their property. Also, I would implement what we at one point had a Youth Explorer program. That program needs to be resurrected. Our young people are our future. They need to know and they need to be educated as well on what they can and cannot do, what's legal, what's not legal. And school resource officers, they would help with that program. Because back in the day, as we used to say, back in the day when we worked those programs, school resource officers help implement those programs.
Once again, thank you, Ms. Bodison. Up next, once again, it's Mr. Arthur Jordan, and once again, you have 1 minute to conclude giving 3 primary goals as sheriff. Mr. Jordan.
One of my goals was primary goal is to restore the trust of the sheriff's office with the community, the people and the businesses, to open transparency up to what we are doing as far as it relates to spending, as far as it relates to the investigations on criminal activities that are happening in the communities that families are concerned with, that feel that they're not getting the answer, to be visible in the community as sheriff, to be seen, to be heard, to let them know that we're out there with them, that once I get elected, that I'm not behind closed doors or in offices. And also to open up programs for mental health. We have a lot of that in our community. A lot of people getting arrested. Mental health, diversity and bias training, and also the use of force, and working with the victims that have been victimized, particularly the women, by perpetrators within our community, and to rid this community of all drugs and the gang-related activities.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. And then finally, once again, 1 minute for you, Mr. Harold Lowry, our next candidate. 1 minute to conclude, giving 3 primary goals as a sheriff. Mr. Lowry.
Thank you. One of my goals, obviously, is to bring accountability, transparency, and integrity back to the office of sheriff. That's needed. My other goal is obviously to bridge the gap between the communities in Colleton County. I feel God has put this on my heart to run for this office because I am the person who can bridge that gap. I have the ability, praise the Lord, to communicate with all people. I have the ability to reason, solve problems, and find answers. That's why I'm running for sheriff. Thank you.
All right, once again, thank you, Mr. Lowry. I want to thank all 3 of our candidates for the, once again, running for Democratic, once again, for the Sheriff's Department. You're watching the part 1 of the virtual forum for the Democratic and Republican candidates for sheriff, and of course we just had our 3 Democratic candidates. Once again, thank you, Ms. Alicia Bodison, Mr. Arthur Jordan, and Mr. Harold Lowry. I appreciate all 3 of you. We also want to remind everyone that the candidates that are running for sheriff, they're going to have the election coming up on June the 9th, but we want to remind everybody, voting has already started, and it's going on Monday through Friday from 8 until 5. At the voter registration office. You can actually do that today if you'd like. Once again, a big thank you. I once again want to thank our 3 candidates running for the sheriff of Colleton County in a very special forum, a virtual forum. And thank you, Ms. Bodison, Mr. Jordan, and Mr. Lowry. Thank you so much. We'll be starting back with our Republican candidates coming up with part 2 of our virtual forum for the Democratic and Republican candidates for sheriff. That will resume at 3 o'clock.